This tutorial is for section X8, Solve Multi-Step Inequalities for 8th grade. Number 1, r divided by -1 plus 9 is greater than 10. So we're leveling up here because first they were asking us to do one-step inequalities, then two-step inequalities. Now there may be 3 or more steps. So no new math, all your same skills still apply. You're just going to have to do a couple more steps to get to your final answer. So the first and easiest thing I see to do here is to subtract 9 from both sides. That will leave us with r divided by -1 is greater than, and then 10 minus 9 is 1. Sorry, I was pointing to the wrong one. To get this r by itself then, I will multiply by the denominator, so -1 multiplied on the left and -1 multiplied on the right. So that cancels out here, leaving us with r. Since we multiplied by a negative, we're going to have to flip that sign. So our greater than becomes a less than, and a positive 1 times a -1 becomes a -1. So r is less than -1 is our final answer. So first step, we had to subtract 9. Second step, we multiplied by -1, right? And we had to flip the signs on that one. So number 2, -6 is greater than or equal to -1w minus 7. The first thing to do is add 7 to both sides. Now, here's a trick. When they put that -1 in front of there, that's just kind of invisible math. You don't really have to write that 1. If it helps you, you can write it. If it doesn't help you, leave it off. Either way. But I don't like to see that because I don't want to get anything else confused. So when I rewrote this, I just wrote it as 1 is greater than or equal to -w. So once I do that, we don't want a negative variable, right? So we'll have to multiply both sides by a negative, which means flip all the signs. So -w becomes a positive w. A greater than or equal to becomes a less than or equal to. And then the positive 1 becomes a -1. Now to get our final answer, my trick for you has been to read it backwards. So w is greater than or equal to -1, and so I rewrote it here in the form that we usually see. Number 3, -1h plus 5 is greater than or equal to 3. The first step is that I subtracted 5 from both sides. Just like in number 2, I didn't write in that 1, I just left it as a -h. And then, so -h is greater than or equal to -2. I need to flip the signs, but when I do that, I flip the sign for the h, I flip the inequality, and I flip that -2 into a +2. So our final answer here, h is less than or equal to 2. Number 4, -8 minus -1z is less than -5. So here I told you that I don't like that invisible math showing, and then the other thing is 2 negatives make a positive. So the first step for me is I just rewrote this in a simpler form. So -8 and then 2 negatives make a positive, so plus, I left out that 1, so -8 plus z is less than -5. Now that looks to me a lot cleaner already. So then I'll add 8 to both sides, leaving me with z is less than 3. Number 5, 3 minus -1z is less than 6. So just like in number 4, my first step, I like to clean this up a little. So 2 negatives make a positive, and I just kind of deleted that invisible 1 in front of there. So 3 plus z is less than 6. I'll subtract 3 from both sides. That leaves me with z is less than 3. Number 6, 2 times t plus 2 is less than 6. There's 2 ways to approach this problem. You could first use the distributive property, or you can see that this 2 is being multiplied by everything in the parentheses, but if you divide by 2, you could cancel that out, and this works as easily divisible. So 6 divided by 2 is something that I can do. So that would leave me with 3 there. If I divide by 2 on the left, this gets canceled out, and leaves me with only that t plus 2 on the left. So it may look a little bit more complicated, but it kind of saves you a step in the long run. So t plus 2 is less than 3. I'll subtract 2 from both sides. 3 minus 2 is 1, so t is less than 1. Number 7. 4 times g minus 2 plus 3 is less than or equal to negative 1. Now, unlike our last problem, if you divide it by 4, that's going to get complicated with the 3 here, with the negative 1 here. So my first step for this one is to use the distributive property. So one thing that you might do to remind you how to work the distributive property is to draw little arrows to remind you that that 4 is being multiplied by the g, but 4 is also being multiplied by that negative 2. So once I do that, my next line reads 4g minus 8, and then everything else I just copied down, plus 3 less than or equal to negative 1. Now that cleaned it up, and it's something that I can work with a lot easier. So the next thing that I see on this step is I have a negative 8 and a positive 3. I can easily combine those like terms. So negative 8 plus 3 is negative 5. So in my third line, I have 4g minus 5 is less than or equal to negative 1. The opposite of minus 5 is plus 5, so I'll add 5 to both sides. Negative 1 plus 5 is 4. So 4g is less than or equal to 4. I'll divide both sides by 4 and get g is less than or equal to 1. So one thing I want you to notice here is that if you're doing this correctly and going step by step, do you see how this kind of forms a triangle pattern? So your lines should get a little bit shorter each time, and that triangle pattern will sort of let you know that you're doing it right. Number 8, v divided by negative 1 minus 7 is greater than or equal to negative 11. The first thing I see that I can fix here is to add 7 to both sides. That leaves me with v divided by negative 1 is greater than or equal to, and then negative 11 plus 7 is negative 4. To get v by itself in this fraction problem, I'll need to multiply by the denominator. So negative 1 is getting multiplied on both sides. That leaves v by itself on the left, and then a negative 4 times a negative 1 is a positive 4. So final answer there, v is less than or equal to 4. Number 9, 2 is less than w divided by 2 plus 1. This guy's hanging out here all by his lonesome, so I want to deal with him first. So minus 1, minus 1. That leaves us with 2 on the left, and that leaves us with 1 on the left, and then w divided by 2 on the right. Where we get this 2 is that we multiply by the denominator to cancel this out and leave w by itself. 2 times 1 is 2, so 2 is less than w. But remember to read it backwards to get your variable on the right. So w is greater than 2 is what our final answer would be. Number 10, g divided by 11 plus 7 is less than 6. I'll first subtract 7 from both sides, leaving me with a negative 1 on the right. To get g by itself, when it's being divided by 11, I'll multiply by 11. I'll do that to both sides. Negative 1 times positive 11 is negative 11, so g is less than negative 11. Number 11, negative 6 is greater than 7 times k plus 9 plus 1. So the first thing that I see here is that I'll need to use the distributive property. So again, if you want to draw in those little arrows to help you remember, the common mistake here is people will see that 7k, they'll multiply that, but then they'll accidentally just bring down that 9 and forget to multiply it by the 7. So if the arrows help you, I even do that for my upper level math classes, just so you can see what's happening and don't forget. So after the distributive property, I have 7k plus 63 plus 1. Now this is an easy fix for us. 63 plus 1, I can combine those like terms and get 64. Then I'll subtract 64 from both sides. That leaves me with negative 70 on the left and 7k on the right. To get k by itself, I'll divide both sides by 7. That leaves me with negative 10 is greater than k, or if I read that backwards, k is less than negative 10. And that's it.